Easily one of the most essential tracks of the 80s of all time. It's a song that perfectly captures the neon decade in all of its glory and infamy. And it almost never happened. Written by a band that was virtually unknown in the US at the time, this track changed everything, and I mean everything. It went to number 1 and is still arguably, I would say it's the definitive track of the 80s. But the truth is, the singer-songwriter who wrote it, he didn't even like it. He didn't want it on the album. He called it lightweight. He said it didn't fit with the rest of the songs even. With just one slot open on this album, came down to this song and 2 other tracks. Find out what changed his mind, plus discover which 2 songs inspired the process of writing. It's very interesting. The story behind this one will make you hear it in a whole new way. It's coming up on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember watching the classic game shows growing up, like, Price is Right, or Hollywood Squares, or the Newlywed Game, so many others. Make sure to subscribe below right now. Click the bell. I know you'll dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia and nostalgia overall. We also have a Patreon. I want to remind you about that. We have another catalog of content. We are a self-funded channel. It really helps us to keep it a daily channel and to do other interviews, so check that out if you have a chance. So guess what? It's time for another edition of our series, The New Standards. This is a show that takes an in-depth look into songs that transcend everything. Genre, decade, fads, everything. Songs that are monumental touchstones in our culture and within our society. But you know what? For today's installment, we're rewinding back to 1985, that glorious year, to cover a song that this program was made for. An undisputable classic. It not only conquered America, but fittingly, the planet. From Tears for Fears' Songs from the Big Chair, it's Everybody Wants to Rule the World. For fans familiar with TFF's first album, The Hurting, which I've got right there, there was a palpable excitement building for the next offering. Most of these fans, though, they lived somewhere other than America. It's because here in the States, The Hurting, it really flew under the radar. It stalled at number 73 on the Billboard 200. It was played on college rock radio pretty much, but there wasn't a lot of college rock radio stations at that time. Additionally, the album's singles were more or less no-shows on the Hot 100. They became famous after. Still, the British-born duo of Roland Orzabal and Kurt Smith, they had high expectations as they finished Song from the Big Chair. After all, on their side of the Atlantic, The Hurting, it went to number 1 and it kicked out 3 top 5 singles. It was like night and day compared to the States. Roland noted there were important similarities between the 2 albums, but he considered Songs from the Big Chair to be the much better record. I have to agree with him, though. The Hurting is amazing. As he would say, it was more mature and more representative of them as people, steeped with humor and sarcasm and cynicism, whereas The Hurting was quite insular. Big Chair projects outward for sure, adopting a much larger worldview. It was made for the masses. And in that spirit of expanding perspective, it was Songs from the Big Chair that introduced Tears for Fears to America, launching the career into the stratosphere. The album was worth more than a king's ransom. It sold in excess of 10 million albums worldwide, and according to the RIAA, at least 5 million of those were in the US alone. It was massive. It was something special. I know I've said it in the past, but it's basically Tears for Fears were the Beatles with synthesizers in the 80s. This is what the Beatles would have sounded like. They wrote music that nobody could touch. They were in their own category. This album kicked out 2 number 1 hits and a number 3 as well, all iconic.
Shout, let it all out. Something happens and I'm head over heels. It's my own design.
Every song on this album is, to me, they're perfect. So many great songs. Mother's Talk, I Believe, Listen, The Working Hour. I mean, are you kidding me? This album is stacked. It's life-affirming. let's get down to the song that helped them rule the world. The track that made it all possible, Everybody Wants to Rule the World. It was actually this last song written for the album. I mean, how many times do we hear this? But it was true. Came into existence while TFF and the production crew were laboring on Shout. We talked about this a few months ago. They thought Shout would be the last song for the record, but it was complicated. It pushed the sessions way over time, over budget, everything. But it was during this prolonged struggle to complete Shout that Roland played 2 simple chords on an acoustic guitar. That's where it started, 2 simple chords. And these chords caught the attention of producer Chris Hughes, who told Orzabal, "You got to turn them into a song, man. They were just too good not to." But Roland wasn't really interested in constructing a song out of his little melody. He felt it was, as he said, too lightweight, and it didn't fit with the rest of the album. So neither Roland nor Kurt took it seriously at first. But Hughes kept pushing the song. In fact, he made sure the band played it at the end of each recording session. Until, in Roland's words, they began to wear it. According to Roland, the song's marching shuffle beat, that was influenced by the rhythmic repeating guitar chords from the intro of Waterfront by Simple Minds. It was a number 13 hit in the UK. Orzabal admitted that he programmed the drum machine to the same rhythm as Waterfront. He said, "It's not very original. It's just one of those rhythms that's just absolutely compelling." But then he added, "I mean, it's slightly different from Waterfront." In time, Roland came up with a chorus and a verse, but he still didn't have the title figured out. He had an idea, though. He wanted it to be Everybody something. Something, something. He kept singing to himself, "Everybody da-da-da-da-da." And eventually those da-da-das evolved into Everybody Wants to Go to War. He was getting close, but the phrase didn't have, the right ring to it. Orzabal finally solved his writing dilemma by lifting the line "Everybody Wants to Rule the World" from the first verse of the Clash's song "Charlie Don't Surf." From there, the tune, it just flowed beautifully. However, the nicked lyrics, that didn't go unnoticed by the legendary Joe Strummer, who had written the Clash tune. I love Joe Strummer. I love his stories. Later, after Tears for Fears released Everybody Wants to Rule the World and it went to number 1, Strummer confronted Roland in a restaurant. He told Orzabal that he owed him a $5. And Roland proceeded to pull £5 out of his pocket. He gave it to Strummer and he paid him his cut of the royalties. The two reportedly had a good chuckle from this good-natured exchange. It's really funny. I love those stories. When Rule the World was ready to record, though, it was an effortless process, unlike Shout. According to Roland, once they got all the parts, it basically just recorded itself. Hughes would concur, saying, "As a piece of recording history, it's bland as hell." But even though recording it was easy, the track almost didn't make it on the album. Like I mentioned, Kurt and Roland, they didn't think much of this song. It was really little more than an afterthought when it was completed. Roland confirmed this at the time that he had more songs that they needed for Big Chair, with 7 already committed to the album. They just needed 1 more to round it out, and came down to a choice between 3 remaining tracks. And from there, Smith and Orzabal, they weren't going to vote for Rule the World. It wasn't going to go on the album. It was settled. The only reason Everybody Wants to Rule the World came out on that album was because of Chris Hughes, the producer's dogged persistence. That this song, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, it had to be on the album. Smith later admitted they only included the song to get an American hit, but it wasn't their idea. In Hughes' words, they needed a drive time single, a song that Americans could crank up, while cruising in their cars. Orzabal and Smith, they weren't convinced, but they acquiesced. Rule the World's writing credits were divided 3 ways. It was actually between Orzabal, Hughes, and keyboardist Ian Stanley. I'm so shocked that it almost didn't make the album. And this is a no-brainer. And although Kurt Smith wouldn't get a composition credit, he absolutely owned this track with his signature vocal performance. Just amazing. So let me pause for a moment before we go on to recognize our sponsors, Any Eyewear, the glasses I always wear. So right now, you can choose from a variety of different frames to fit your need or needs, from readers to migraine relief glasses to transition lenses to blue blocks. They got you covered all the way through. And you can actually shop by frame size and color and design your own pair. Plus, you can get up to 80% off regular retail prices. Click on the info button right up here to get the special POR price. Tell them we sent you. Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I could talk about this song forever. I adore this song. Like I said, I think it's a definitive song of the 80s. I think if aliens came to Earth 1,000 years from now and wanted to know what the 80s were like, just play him, Everybody Wants to Rule the World.
Welcome to your life.
It defines the 80s. It's rooted in 80s production, though. But it's that production, I would argue, the synthesizer and blaring guitar, that makes it so enduring. I mean, no one can deny the first 5 seconds of this song. It's a time machine, every bit as effective as the DeLorean. It just instantly transports you right back to 1985. Although musically, Everybody Wants to Rule the World is quite jangly and definitely catchy, the thematic elements of the song, very serious. I mean, you can feel it. Curtis said, it's about everybody wanting power, about warfare, and the misery it causes. Orzabal added, it was our move away from introspective lyrics into looking at things globally. Set against the backdrop of the chest-pounding propaganda of the Cold War back in '85, the Soviet Union and the United States were digging into the height of the Cold War. The arms race and the threat of nuclear war was escalating. The world's economy was obsessed with greed, the greed of the 80s, the love of money for money's sake, the ethos of wealth and power. It permeated politics and pop culture, for sure. Everybody Wants to Rule the World. It was a song that kind of called it out, right? Called it all out, depicting and condemning the corruption, the oppression, and the abuse that comes from an insatiable hunger for power. It was the perfect song for the era. Fittingly taking over the airwaves at the midpoint of the Greed is Good decade, right before Wall Street came out.
That greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
Even so many years later, this tongue-in-cheek pushback track still resonates, reminding us that we still have some work to do, a lot of work. However, despite this tune's serious subject matter, Roland said there are some inside jokes associated with this song, most of which have been kept close to the vest. One interview said it's more possibly about one person than anything else, but you don't know him. It's a little cryptic, but when pressed further, Roland declined to elaborate. Who do you think it is? Tell me in the comments. However, he did explain one of the song's jokes. I actually just mentioned this in our episode on Shout, but for a refresher in a little bit more detail. The line, so glad we've almost made it, so glad they had to fade it. That's a big dig on TFF's record label, said Roland about it. This is about the record company wanting to knock 5 seconds off the length of Shout because they thought it was just too long. It's a 6-minute record, and 5 seconds was their compromise. It seems pathetic. I think it's pathetic. Inside jokes aside, though, there is one particular set of lyrics that has always stood out to me. It's the last part. Say that you'll never, never, never need it. One headline, why believe it? Then after that, all for freedom and for pleasure, nothing ever lasts forever. That's just so profound. It's so simple to say. It's such a perfect way to close out this indelible song. To Kurt and Roland's surprise, though, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, that was released as the first Big Chair single here in America. Most countries, including the UK, their homeland, first single was Mother's Talk, which was then followed by Shout. Drive Time single or not, the duo didn't understand why the label was pushing so hard for Rule the World. They didn't get it. However, they did figure it out pretty quick once it skyrocketed up the charts and started to define the year that they were in. mean, this song is a monstrous success then and now. It's all over the airwaves. Everybody Wants to Rule the World, of course, everybody knows it went to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, to number 1 on the Cashbox chart, number 1 on the Hot Dance Club chart, went to number 2 on the Top Rock Tracks chart, and it went to number 2 on the AC chart. The AC chart, the Adult Contemporary chart, it went to the top of the charts everywhere. Every chart. Pure, unadulterated crossover domination. It ruled the world. Sorry, I keep using that. And you know, Kurt, he had to give credit where credit was due. I quote, "I'll give Chris Hughes his due. He was a big supporter of Rule the World, and we weren't that sure of it. And in America, that was the first single that they really went for, and it broke the market for us." End of quote. It's true. I mean, then Shout went to number 1 from there. Orzabal recalled that they were touring Canada at the time that this was all going down. When they set foot across the border and played their first concert in America, they were at number 1. It was just hard to fathom. Quickly, it started to snowball. The gigs grew and grew and grew in size, and soon they were playing in LA with helicopters and fireworks all around them. They actually kind of had a little taste of what Beatlemania might have been like. A little taste. Of course, the song and TFF's success spread to the rest of the world as well. Internationally, Everybody Wants to Rule the World scored top 5 placements everywhere, all over the globe. Like I said, it absolutely lived up to its name. It ruled 1985. And the music video, that was directed by Nigel Dick, that was shot at multiple locations in and around LA, and is choreographed to double down on the American Drive Time single. And this point was reiterated by Kurt Smith in the book, I Want My MTV. He said, "We went to LA to go to the desert. We got a car, an Austin Healey 3000, and we drove. It's pretty much the whole concept. I slept in a camper bus out in the middle of nowhere for a couple of nights, and I had to be up at 4 a.m. so we could get that sunrise shot." The music video, of course, heavy rotation on MTV. It added to the sheer dominance of the track and put a visual to it. But not only did Rule the World rule the airwaves and MTV, it's, like I said, become the king of pop culture placements. I'm not kidding here. Song is everywhere in movies and TV, commercials. It's been covered by so many bands. Some memorable ones. In the 80s, you could catch it in Val Kilmer's Real Genius. In the 90s, it was featured in ER, Romeo and Michelle's High School Reunion. Pirates of Silicon Valley was really cool how they did it there. In the new millennium, it's been everywhere. Everybody Wants to Rule the World. It exploded. Malcolm in the Middle, Numbers, Click, The Wire, Cold Case, Medium, Watchmen, The Goldbergs, Pretty Liars, Glee.
There's a room where the light won't find you.
Everybody Hates Chris, Pixels, Mr. Robot, Ready Player One. To All the Boys I Loved Before Bumblebee, Superstore, Riverdale. But alas, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the USA series Psych. Sure, we have a lot of fans out there of this show, where they essentially worship Tears for Fears. Which, how could you not? I mean, one of the greatest bands ever. And they feature Kurt Smith on multiple episodes, including a performance of this song. I think psychic detective Sean Spencer speaks for all of us when he says, "I love Kurt Smith and I don't care who knows. I'll sing it from the rooftops."
Everybody wants to rule the...
Speaking of performances, Everybody Wants to Rule the World has also been covered by Don Henley, Nick Kershaw and Go West Together, Patti Smith, Trevor Horn, Yacht Rock Review, Matchbox 20, Incubus, John Mayer, Train's done it, Joan Baez, Fon the Shins, and Portugal the Man with Kurt Smith. And of course, Lord recorded a dark interpretation of the track in 2013, which was included in The Hunger Games, Catching Fire on that soundtrack, a movie. Actually, Tears for Fears were opening their concerts with about 15 seconds of the Lord version. I saw it when I got to meet him backstage. That was like an amazing moment.
Welcome to your life.
More recently, of course, Weezer included a version of Everybody Wants to Rule the World on 2019's Teal album. I should also mention you can hear an alternative version of the song called Everybody Wants to Run the World, which is on the super deluxe version of Songs from the Big Chair. Currently, Everybody Wants to Rule the World boasts over 2 billion, that's a B, 2 billion streams across multiple platforms. And back in 2021, it re-entered the charts. It went to number 9 on Billboard's Hot Rock and Alternative Songs chart. This song is without a question a new standard. I've said that it defines the 80s, but I think it defines the 80s musically, lyrically, but most of all, emotionally. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a better fit than this TFF composition. Now, on a personal note, when I hear this song, it paints such a visual picture to me. I remember buying this tape in the early summer of 1985, one of the best years ever. I wore it out. Inside my Walkman, playing it on my boombox. I mean, I spent all of my allowance on those huge batteries, the D batteries that you had to put inside the boombox so it would play without a cord. I wanted to be cool like the guys on the commercial, playing the boombox on my shoulder. I swore it took like 28 batteries to run for like 2 hours. I wasted a lot of money. Remember this one time I was playing soccer with my friends in this field, and I brought the boombox and it was blasting the song from the sidelines. And I take a break like every 5 minutes and go back and rewind the song and play it again. It was just, that's how much I loved it. And I remember my crush and her friends were on the sidelines. We were trying to look cool. And then there was the bully of the group. You know, there's always one, right? And he had his little toadies with him. And I remember him saying, "Hey, geek boy, quit messing with your stereo. Get over here and play. I'm sick of this song." And I can't say what he said. It was, of course, a gay slur. Just then, I'll never forget it. This girl I had a crush on, she walked over to me, she smiled at me, and she said, "Adam, don't listen to that guy. I love this song. It's so boss. Keep playing it." She actually knew my name. That was the thing that I remembered. But even better, she loved my music, my song. I gotta tell you, it was such a beautiful moment. I can still remember exactly the visuals. It was twilight, the sun was going down in Little Moreland, Idaho. Just breathtaking colors were converging on the mountains. I remember the smell of 80s Giorgio perfume from my crush. She was messing with her jelly bracelets. She had a jean jacket on. She had stonewashed pants, pink Converse high tops on. And Tears for Fears was the soundtrack to that moment. Most of all, she liked my music. Is there anything better? I mean, Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I did for about 5 seconds in that moment. Hey, leave us a comment about Everybody Wants to Rule the World and about Tears for Fears. What are your memories of the song? Share some of them below. The 80s, that was the other thing that was so great about it, all the visuals that I was saying, the smells, it was just a different time. It was so amazing. I would love to hear your stories below. What do you think about the music video? That one takes me back as well. And what does the song mean to you all these years later? Let's have a good discussion. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe below. Love to have you as part of our community. Till next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.